The night before my daughter's wedding, her fiancé looked me dead in the eye and said, "We only want important people here." By the next day, their $100,000 dream wedding was gone, and they never saw it coming. My name is Richard Hayes. I'm 63 years old, and I've lived a life filled with hard work and sacrifice. I wasn't born wealthy, but through decades of saving, smart investments, and running a small construction company, I built a comfortable life for myself and my daughter, Emily. After her mother passed when Emily was just 16, I promised myself I would do everything in my power to give her the life she deserved. So when Emily told me she was engaged to a man named Scott, a young corporate type with slick back hair and a smile that never seemed to reach his eyes, I put aside my doubts. She was happy, and that was what mattered. I wanted her wedding day to be perfect. No corners cut, no regrets. I poured my savings into it. Over $100,000 in total. I rented out the best ballroom in town, arranged for a 5-course catered dinner, hired a live band, and even booked a floral designer whose work Emily had admired in magazines. I told myself it wasn't just a wedding. It was a tribute to her mother, the day she would have wanted for her only daughter. The night before the wedding, I went to the rehearsal dinner, proud and exhausted from months of planning. That's when it happened. Scott, her fiancé, cornered me near the bar. His smile was tight, his tone dismissive. "Richard," he said, swirling his drink like he was too important to stand still, "I want you to know how much we appreciate everything you've done, but tomorrow is about appearances." Emily and I agreed. We only want important people there. I blinked, unsure I'd heard him right. Important people? What does that mean? He shrugged casually, like he was brushing lint off his sleeve. "You know, executives, investors, people who matter, not construction guys and small-town relatives. It's nothing personal, but we need this wedding to reflect our future." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I had spent years building my business from the ground up, providing for my daughter, making sure she never went without. And now this man, this smug, shallow man, was telling me I wasn't important enough to stand proudly at her wedding? My chest tightened with a mix of rage and heartbreak. "Scott," I said, my voice low, "do you realize that without me, there wouldn't even be a wedding tomorrow?" He smirked. "Oh, there would be. Maybe not as fancy, but there would be. You've been generous, Richard, but don't mistake that for importance." Those words cut deeper than any wound I'd ever suffered. I wanted to storm out, to tell Emily what kind of man she was marrying, but when I looked across the room and saw her smiling with her bridesmaids, my heart sank. She deserved happiness, and I couldn't bear to shatter the night before her big day. So I swallowed my anger, forced a smile, and endured the rehearsal dinner with my dignity hanging by a thread. But inside, something hardened. If Scott thought I was unimportant, he was about to learn just how important I really was. That night, lie awake in my hotel room, I stared at the ceiling replaying his words. "We only want important people here." My jaw clenched as the thought gnawed at me. They wanted a perfect wedding, built on my money, my sweat, and my sacrifices, but they wanted to erase me from it. And in that moment, a decision began to form. If Scott believed I was just a wallet and not a father worth honoring, then maybe tomorrow wouldn't be the wedding he dreamed of. Maybe, just maybe, it wouldn't be a wedding at all. The morning of the wedding rehearsal had left me gutted, but I couldn't let Scott see how deeply his words had cut. After all, men like him thrived on control, believing they were the smartest in the room. But as I walked out of that ballroom and back to my hotel, the sting of "we only want important people" echoed in my ears like a drumbeat. I woke the next morning with red-rimmed eyes and a heaviness in my chest. Emily called early, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Dad, can you believe it? By tonight, I'll be Mrs. Scott Randall." I forced a smile into my voice. "I can believe it, sweetheart. You deserve every bit of happiness." But even as I said it, a sharp pang hit me. Did she know what Scott had said to me last night? Did she agree with him? Or was she blind to his arrogance? I wanted to ask, but I couldn't ruin her day. So I swallowed the question, even as the weight pressed heavier on me. At the hotel, my phone buzzed. A text from Scott. "Morning. Just a reminder. The guest list is tight. We've had to cut a few names. Hope you understand. I frowned, scrolling through the message again. The gall of the man, sending me instructions about who I could and couldn't invite, when I had been the one to pay for every chair, every meal, every flower. I had covered the catering deposit, the ballroom, the band, and now he was treating me like a guest instead of father of the bride. Later that morning, I went down to the venue to check on final preparations. I'd coordinated most of it myself, and I wanted to make sure things were going smoothly. To my surprise, Scott was already there with his best man and two of his groomsmen. They were standing over the seating chart with the wedding planner, their voices hushed but sharp. "Move these people to back," Scott said, tapping names with his finger. "And make sure the Randalls' business partners are front and center." The planner hesitated. "But these are family members." "Family who doesn't matter," Scott interrupted, smirking. "Trust me, this is about optics. My father's investors need to see influence when they walk in." My jaw tightened. He wasn't planning a wedding. He was staging a networking event. Emily wasn't marrying into love. She was being used as a pawn in Scott's ladder climb. I stepped closer. "Excuse me, but those family who don't matter are Emily's blood, her cousins, her aunts, people who helped raise her after her mother passed." Scott's smirk faltered, but only for a second. He straightened his tie and shrugged. "Richard, you wouldn't understand. This is how things are done at our level. It's not personal, it's just business." "Business?" I hissed. "This is my daughter's wedding, not a shareholders' meeting." He chuckled, a sound that grated against my bones. "Relax, old man. Just stay in your lane and let us handle it." "Old man, stay in your lane." The arrogance in his voice lit a fire in my chest. For a split second, I almost exploded then and there, but I stopped myself. Rage would give him power. Patience would give me control. Instead, I looked him dead in the eye and said calmly, "Be careful, Scott. You might just find that the unimportant people hold all the cards." He laughed it off, but I saw something flicker in his expression, doubt. As I walked out of the ballroom, my fists clenched at my sides. My mind raced. Scott wasn't just insulting me anymore. He was erasing me from Emily's big day. And worse, he was dragging her into a marriage built on power plays instead of love. By noon, the cracks were widening. Guests were already calling me, confused about being moved off the seating chart. Some even saying they had been told there wasn't space for them anymore. Each call fueled the same realization. Scott wasn't just humiliating me. He was humiliating Emily, even if she didn't see it yet. I sat alone in my hotel room, staring at the receipts, contracts, and invoices stacked neatly in a folder on the desk. Every cent had come from me. Every signature had my name on it. Without me, there was no venue, no flowers, no music, no wedding. Scott had made one fatal mistake. In his rush to cut me out, he forgot whose foundation he was standing on. By mid-afternoon, the ballroom buzzed with last-minute preparations. Staff rushed between tables. Florists wheeled in towers of white roses, and the band tuned their instruments. To anyone walking in, it looked like a picture-perfect wedding waiting to happen. But beneath the surface, I could feel the rot. I lingered near the back, watching Scott strut around like he owned the place. He barked orders at staff, checked his reflection in every polished surface, and barely acknowledged Emily when she tried to talk to him. I saw the way her smile faltered, the way she tugged nervously at her dress sleeve when he dismissed her with a wave of his hand. It was in that moment I knew my daughter wasn't marrying a partner. She was marrying a man who saw her as a stepping stone. I walked out into the corridor to clear my head, my chest heavy with the weight of it all. I leaned against the wall, staring at the folder of receipts I brought with me. Each page was proof. Every dollar spent, every deposit made, every vendor booked me. It had all been me. And yet Scott had looked me in the eye the night before and said I wasn't important. The rage simmered, but beneath it was something stronger, clarity. For too long, I'd let people like Scott decide my worth. I'd been willing to swallow his insults, to bite my tongue for the sake of Emily's happiness. But I wasn't just some faceless wallet. I was her father, the man who had raised her, held her through her grief, sacrificed his own dreams so she could have hers. Scott didn't deserve her, and he sure as hell didn't deserve the wedding I had built for him. I opened the folder, flipping through contracts one by one. Each one had my name in bold letters at the bottom. The ballroom, reserved under my account. The catering, paid in full by my check. The band, hired through me. Every piece of this wedding was tethered to me. And in that moment, the decision crystallized. If Scott believed I was unimportant, then I'd show him just how important I really was. I wasn't going to shout or beg. I wasn't going to create a scene that embarrassed Emily. No, I would quietly, carefully, dismantle the empire Scott thought he controlled. I started with a call to the florist. "This is Richard Hayes," I said calmly. "Yes, the account holder for tomorrow's event. I need you to hold delivery until further notice." Then the caterer. "This is Mr. Hayes. Please don't serve anything until I arrive personally. Consider the contract on pause." Next, the band. "Yes, Richard Hayes here. I'll need you to wait for my signal before playing tonight. No exceptions." One by one, I pulled strings only I could pull, and with each call, the tightness in my chest loosened. This wasn't sabotage, it was truth. The truth that without me, there was no wedding. As the afternoon slipped into evening, I walked back into the ballroom. Scott was laughing with his groomsmen, oblivious, his ego filling the space like smoke. Emily was across the room, looking tired, her eyes darting between the chaos of vendors and the cold indifference of her fiancé. I caught her gaze and gave her a small, reassuring nod. She didn't know what I was planning, but she didn't need to. Not yet. Tonight would be her revelation, not just mine. I found a quiet corner, pulled out my phone, and stared at the list of vendors now waiting on me. The power thrummed in my hands, steady and undeniable. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one being dismissed or overlooked. I was the one holding all the cards. Scott wanted a wedding without me. Tomorrow, he'd find out what that really looked like. The night before the wedding, I sat in my hotel room with every receipt, contract, and email spread across the desk like a general studying a battlefield map. Each document was more than paper. It was leverage. Scott had strutted around like the wedding was his achievement. But in reality, every flower, every meal, every note of music was anchored to my name. And tomorrow, if I chose, I could unravel it all. Still, a part of me hesitated. This was Emily's day. My daughter, my only child, the girl I had promised to protect after her mother's death. Did I really want to destroy her wedding? Then Scott's words came back like a blade twisting in my chest. "We only want important people here." His smirk, his arrogance, the way he shoved family to the back row and treated me like an outsider to my own daughter's happiness. It ignited a fire too strong to ignore. This wasn't about ruining Emily's day. It was about saving her from a man who had already started chiseling away at her dignity before the vows were even spoken. So I began making calls. Quiet, deliberate, calculated. First, the caterer. I spoke to the owner directly, reminding him whose signature was on the contract. "There's a chance tomorrow's schedule may change," I said smoothly. "If you don't hear from me personally by noon, hold off serving anything. No exceptions." He hesitated, then agreed. Money talked, and mine had already paid half his annual profit. Next, the florist. The towering arrangements Scott wanted were already prepped for delivery. I called him and said simply, "Place everything on hold until I confirm tomorrow morning. Nothing leaves your warehouse without my word." Then the band. They were a 6-piece jazz ensemble, the kind Emily had always dreamed of. I told their manager, "You'll still get your payment, but I need you to wait for my instruction before playing a single note." By midnight, my plan was set. Every vendor was effectively frozen, waiting for me. The skeleton of the wedding was there, the ballroom, the guests, the attire, but the heart of it, the pulse, was mine to control, and I wasn't stopping there. I drafted a letter, one I would carry with me into the venue. It laid out, in plain words, how the wedding had been funded and who had paid for what. Every invoice was attached. If Scott tried to embarrass me publicly, I would expose him for what he really was, a parasite standing on the shoulders of the man he despised. The next morning, I woke early, dressed in my best suit, and slipped a folder of documents under my arm. The hotel mirror reflected a man who looked older than he felt, lines etched deep from years of work and grief. But behind my eyes was something sharper: determination. Arriving at the ballroom, I walked through the doors as staff bustled around in confusion. Trays of food sat untouched in the kitchen. Buckets of flowers waited in the lobby. The band was seated, instruments still in their cases, exactly as planned. Scott, of course, was furious. He stormed toward the vendors, his voice booming, but each of them pointed to me. "You'll need to speak to Mr. Hayes," they said. His face turned red as he spotted me near the back of the room, calm as stone. "What the hell is going on, Richard?" he hissed, grabbing my arm. I pulled free, my voice low but firm. "You wanted a wedding without me. Consider this a preview." He blustered, sputtering, but for the first time I saw a real fear in his eyes. The realization was dawning on him. The empire he thought he controlled was mine to dismantle with a single word. But I wasn't finished yet. I still had a daughter to protect. As Emily floated into the room in her robe, her hair half-pinned, she noticed the tension immediately. "Dad? Scott? What's happening?" Scott opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. "Nothing yet, sweetheart. But there's something you need to know before you walk down that aisle." The air inside the ballroom was thick with unease. Caterers stood idly by their carts. Florists lingered near their arrangements, and the band quietly polished their instruments, waiting for my word. Every eye seemed to flick toward me, as though they sensed I was a hinge on which the day would swing. Scott's face was a mask of fury. His perfectly gelled hair was beginning to flop out of place as he tugged at it. He turned to Emily, forcing a smile that looked more like a snarl. "Sweetheart, it's nothing, just a minor mix-up. Your dad doesn't understand how things work at this level." Emily frowned, confused. "Dad, what's going on?" I stepped closer, keeping my voice calm but steady. "Emily, everything you see here, the flowers, the food, the music, even this ballroom, it was all paid for by me. Every contract, every receipt, every deposit. And your fiancé," I glanced at Scott, who shifted nervously, "has been trying to erase me from it since the beginning." Scott barked a laugh, too loud, too sharp. "That's ridiculous. Emily, don't listen. He's trying to make this about himself, as usual." But I saw Emily's eyes narrow. She knew me better than anyone. I wasn't a man who created drama for attention. "Then let's make this simple," I said, pulling the folder from under my arm. "Here's the contract with the caterer, signed by me. Here's the florist invoice, my bank account listed. The band, my name on every line. Without me, this entire wedding doesn't exist." I spread the papers across a nearby table. The truth laid bare in black ink. Guests who had started to filter encircled closer, whispers rising. Emily picked up one of the papers, her hand trembling. "Scott, is this true?" Scott's smooth mask cracked. "It doesn't matter who paid for what," he snapped. "What matters is appearances. This wedding is about showing people our future." "Our future?" Emily's voice rose, sharp with hurt. "Or your career?" The room went still. Scott sputtered, trying to recover. "You don't understand, Em. These people, my father's partners, they need to see us as power players. That's how we'll build a life together. Your dad's just stuck in his small-town ways." My heart ached watching her face. Confusion, betrayal, dawning realization. It all flickered across her features. She looked so much like her mother in that moment, strong but wounded. I stepped closer, my voice low but clear. "Emily, when your mother passed, I promised I would protect you. I can't stop you from marrying this man, if you choose to. But I won't stand here and let him strip me from your life, or use you as a pawn in his." Scott turned on me, his voice dripping with venom. "You're destroying her wedding. Do you realize that?" I straightened, meeting his glare. "No, Scott, you did that the moment you decided the father of the bride wasn't important enough to be part of it." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Emily's bridesmaids exchanged uneasy glances, and even some of Scott's groomsmen shifted uncomfortably. The truth was out now, undeniable. Scott, desperate, tried one last push. He grabbed Emily's hand, plastering on that fake smile. Baby, don't let him ruin this. Once the ceremony starts, none of this will matter. We'll be married and everything will be perfect. Emily pulled her hand free, her eyes glistening. Perfect? Scott, you didn't even want my family here. You didn't even want my father here. How could you build a marriage on that? Her voice cracked, but her words were strong. For the first time, she was truly seeing him. I remained silent, letting her find her voice. This wasn't my fight anymore. It was hers. Scott's composure shattered. His face twisted as he snapped. You don't get it, Emily. Without me, you're nothing. Without me, you'll never move beyond this small-town life. And that was it. The final nail. The arrogance, the cruelty. It was all out in the open. Emily's chin lifted. Then maybe I don't need you. Because I'd rather have nothing with people who love me than everything with a man who doesn't. The ballroom erupted in murmurs. Scott's face drained to color, his power slipping like sand through his fingers. The ballroom, once buzzing with a hum of anticipation, now stood frozen. Guests who had begun mingling near the bar were whispering, some even pulling out their phones, sensing a scene worth recording. The bride and groom weren't locked in a romantic gaze. No, they were locked in a battle, and everyone could see it. Scott's jaw clenched as Emily's words echoed. I'd rather have nothing with people who love me than everything with a man who doesn't. He forced a chuckle, but it rang hollow. You're upset, sweetheart. Weddings are stressful. We can talk about this later. Emily's shoulders stiffened. No, Scott, we're talking about it now. I stayed a few steps back, giving her space, but making it clear I wasn't going anywhere. My folder of receipts sat open on the table, the truth glaring in black and white for anyone to see. Scott turned to me, his polished facade unraveling. His voice was a hiss. This is your doing, old man. You couldn't stand that she was finally marrying into something better, could you? You had to drag her back down to your level. I met his glare with calm steel. Better? Scott, you think money and connections make you better. But respect, loyalty, love, that's what makes a man. And you don't have any of it. A ripple of agreement ran through the room. Even some of Scott's guests shifted uncomfortably. Emily stepped between us, her voice trembling but strong. Scott, you told my dad he wasn't important. You wanted him erased from our wedding. How could you think that was okay? Scott's composure shattered completely. Because he isn't important, he shouted, his voice cracking under the weight of his own arrogance. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Look at him, an aging construction guy clinging to his pride. I'm the one with the future. I'm the one who matters. The words hung in the air like poison. Emily's bridesmaids exchanged shocked glances. A murmur of disgust rippled among the guests. The truth was out now, naked and ugly. I stepped forward, my voice steady. You're right about one thing, Scott. I am a construction man. I've spent my life building things with my hands, homes, businesses, a future for my daughter. I built this wedding too, every piece of it. And without me, it all falls apart. You thought I was unimportant, but the truth is, you've been standing on my foundation this whole time. The caterer, catching my words, nodded subtly. The florist crossed her arms, watching Scott with thinly veiled contempt. The band leader raised his eyebrows as if waiting for my signal. Scott's face turned red, panic creeping into his eyes. Emily, don't listen to this nonsense. He's manipulating you. If he pulls out now, we'll lose everything. Exactly. Emily cut in, her voice sharp. And that's the point. Without my dad, none of this exists. And instead of thanking him, you tried to erase him. She turned to me, her eyes softening. Dad, I'm so sorry. I didn't see it before. I wanted to believe Scott loved me. But now I see, her voice cracked. I see what Mom would have seen right away. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but I held them back. This wasn't the time for me to break. This was Emily's moment to reclaim her power. Scott lunged toward her, his voice desperate now. Don't throw this away. We need this wedding. Emily, my father's investors. But Emily stepped back, shaking her head. That's all you ever cared about, isn't it? Not me, just appearances. The silence that followed was deafening. Guests who had been skeptical at first now openly glared at Scott. The tide had turned, and there was no pulling it back. I closed the folder and tucked it under my arm. This wedding is over. I said firmly, "Vendors, thank you for your patience. You'll all be paid in full." The caterer nodded and began directing his staff to pack up. The florist quietly wheeled the arrangements back out. The band started zipping up their cases. Piece by piece, the $100,000 wedding unraveled before Scott's eyes. He spun in circles, his voice breaking. "You can't do this. This is my day." Emily, her voice steady now, delivered the final blow. "No, Scott, this was supposed to be our day, but you turned it into your show, and I'm done being part of it." The ballroom no longer felt like a wedding venue. The chandeliers still glowed, the tables were still dressed in silk, but the energy had shifted entirely. Guests whispered in clusters, eyes darting toward Scott as though he were a fallen king stripped of his crown. Emily stood tall in her robe, her bare finger glinting where the ring had been only moments before. The strength in her posture was unmistakable. Even though her voice had wavered, she had chosen to end it, and in doing so, she had freed herself. Scott, on the other hand, was unraveling. His face was blotchy red, his hands trembling as he clutched the ring like a lifeline. "Emily, please," he muttered, his voice cracking now, nothing like the confident man he had been just an hour earlier. "You can't do this. Not in front of everyone." She shook her head, her tone calm but firm. "That's exactly why I have to do this, Scott. Because everyone needed to see who you really are." He turned then, desperately scanning the room for support. "You all know me. You know my family. This is ridiculous." He's turning her against me. He jabbed a finger in my direction. But no one came to his defense. A silence stretched, heavy and damning. Even his own groomsmen avoided his eyes, their loyalty cracking under the weight of truth. I stepped closer, my voice low enough to cut through the murmurs. "No, Scott, you turned her against yourself. I just gave her the chance to see it." The band leader zipped his last case and carried it out. The caterer's staff wheeled trays back toward the kitchen. The florist exited with the last of her roses. Piece by piece, the illusion of grandeur Scott had tried to build crumbled in front of him. Emily's best friend, one of the bridesmaids, slipped her arm around Emily's shoulders. "You did the right thing," she whispered loud enough for others to hear. "This wasn't love, it was control." Emily nodded, her eyes shimmering, but no tears fell. Not anymore. She wasn't broken. She was liberated. Scott finally snapped. He slammed the ring onto the table, his voice rising in a bitter shout. "You'll regret this, Emily. You'll crawl back when you realize what you've lost." That was his final mistake, because Emily didn't flinch. She simply looked him in the eye and said, "I'd rather lose money than lose myself." The guests erupted in quiet applause, not loud, not mocking, but steady, like a verdict. Scott froze, his face contorting with rage and shame. For the first time, he realized he had no control, no stage left to stand on. He stormed toward the exit, muttering curses, but no one stopped him. No one begged him to stay. The heavy doors closed behind him, and just like that, the $100,000 wedding he had boasted about was gone, dismantled by the very man he called unimportant. Emily turned to me then, her eyes soft but steady. "Dad," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." I shook my head, pulling her into a hug. "No, sweetheart, thank you for seeing him for who he was, for choosing yourself." She buried her face against my shoulder, and in that moment, I felt a weight lift I hadn't even realized I was carrying. The years of sacrifice, the sleepless nights working overtime to give her more, the grief of losing her mother, all of it came together in this one embrace. I hadn't just saved her wedding day. I had saved her future. The guests began to drift out quietly, offering sympathetic words and promises to keep in touch. A few relatives clasped my hand, some even whispering, "You did the right thing, Richard." When the ballroom was finally empty, Emily and I sat together in the silence. The flowers were gone, the music was gone, the food was gone, but what remained was stronger. "You know, Emily said softly, I thought this was the happiest day of my life. But maybe the happiest day is realizing I don't need to prove myself to anyone, not even him. I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Your mom would be proud, not because of the dress or the flowers or the ballroom, but because you chose respect over appearances. That's what matters. For the first time in days, Emily's laugh rang out, light, unburdened, free. It had been 6 months since the night the $100,000 wedding vanished before it ever began. 6 months since my daughter had stood in front of friends, family, and strangers and chosen herself over a man who had wanted to erase me. The memory of Scott's face, twisted with rage as he stormed out of the ballroom, still lingered, but it no longer haunted me. It made me smile, because for once, arrogance hadn't won. Emily moved back home for a while after the breakup. At first, she was quiet, her night spent replaying what had happened, questioning how she had missed the signs. But slowly, piece by piece, I watched her rebuild herself. She went back to her teaching job, poured her heart into her students, and even started taking evening classes toward her master's degree. On weekends, she laughed again, real, unguarded laughter I hadn't heard in months. And every time I saw that smile, I knew I had done the right thing. Scott, on the other hand, didn't fare so well. Word spread quickly about what had happened at the wedding. In our town, news traveled faster than wildfire, and soon everyone knew the story. The groom who had insulted his bride's father, the man whose own arrogance had cost him everything. Business partners pulled back, whispers of his temper and pride surfacing in meetings. By the time Emily ran into him at a cafe months later, he looked smaller, thinner, like the weight of his own failure had carved pieces out of him. He tried to smile, tried to make small talk, but Emily simply wished him well and walked away. She told me later, I didn't feel anger, Dad, just pity. That, I think, was her true victory. As for me, I returned to my construction business. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. Every beam, every brick reminded me of what Scott had failed to understand. Importance isn't about appearances. It's about building something that lasts. One evening, Emily and I sat on the porch, the sun setting in streaks of gold and red. She sipped tea while I leaned back in the chair her mother had once loved. Dad, she said softly, I was so blind. I thought Scott's world was what I wanted. Fancy dinners, big houses, powerful friends. But standing there that night, watching you dismantle it all, I realized what mattered. You never tried to be impressive. You just were, because you loved me, because you built everything with your own hands. Her words hit me harder than any gavel, harder than any verdict. Tears stung my eyes, but I swallowed them back, managing a smile. Sweetheart, I didn't tear that wedding apart to hurt you. I did it to protect you. And I'd do it again 1,000 times if I had to. She leaned against my shoulder, her voice steady. I know, and that's why when I do get married one day, the only person whose opinion will matter is yours. For a long time, we sat there in silence, the cicadas buzzing the fields, the memories of a ruined wedding fading into the night. The wedding that never happened had been painted as a disaster by some, but I didn't see it that way. To me, it was a rebirth. Emily had escaped a marriage built on lies, and I had kept the promise I'd made to her mother on her deathbed, to always protect our daughter, no matter what. That night, before I turned in, I glanced at the old photo on my nightstand. Me, Emily, and her mother on the day Emily was born. Her mother's smile radiated pride, her arms cradling the baby who would grow into the woman I now saw finding her own strength.